start. Hi everybody, it's Mxiety. We are on tonight with the amazing Dr. Emory Daniel. We're going to be talking about parasocial relationships, and I'm going to be picking his brain, and then it's just, normal discussion like usual. Hi, Dr. Daniel.
Hello, how are you?
I'm really good. I'm really excited to talk about this because this is a deep dive. I'm not gonna lie, I'm excited for every single guest we have on. So, but this is exciting.
No, I'm very much looking forward to it. Something I always like talking about, probably to ad nauseum. So anytime I get the opportunity to talk about it, it's a good day for me.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's do it. So first, if you don't mind introducing yourself and telling us about your background and stuff.
Sure. So hello, I am Dr. Emory S. Daniel. I am an assistant professor at Appalachian State University in the mountains of North Carolina. Um, let's see, I'm trying to think here, getting into an introduction here. Yeah, I do a lot of work within strategic communication, which is kind of like a bridge between advertising and public relations. But I've always had issues with how things were advertised. So I really like looking at interpersonal communication, face to face, one on one, and how that's used in mass media. So I'm a media communication scholar. People call me a media psychologist. I go by kind of a jack of all trades here. Yeah. So, but I'm also um, dabbling a little bit into streaming and marketing for a website called Geeks Like Us. And I do a small stream called Lore du Jour, where I take video game lore and talk about it in copious amounts of detail. So that's all to try to teach a class. I'm trying to figure this out before I get into actually lecturing at this university about how to stream and what are some of the things they should be looking out for.
Wow, that's so cool. I should have, if I was a better interviewer, I would have asked you for those links up front, but I didn't. But if you want to throw them into our Twitter chat just by chance, because you have a second, I would definitely love to promote any links that you can think of.
Well, and I see on chat that somebody got to my App State directory, so
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Okay. All right.
That's like the only place you can find like my professional link, but my Twitter handle is foosrodoc.
That I have. That I
Yeah.
posted. Yeah.
So cool. So, but that is my Twitter handle, and you can reach me there. I usually just talk about gaming, more parasocial stuff, occasional sports ball, that kind of thing.
Oh, sports ball. We don't know what that is in this stream, unfortunately.
That's all right.
Unless it's brain injury, then I guess we'll talk about that.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Okay, so let's get down to business, directly into it. What are parasocial relationships?
So I thought this was kind of an interesting topic because it came out recently on Twitter. Our friend who is in the chat right now, Zeitgeist, messaged me and said, "Oh, by the way, this new game, interactive experience, Gamer Girl, is something you should look at because there are a couple people on Twitter talking about parasocial relationships and the relationships that streamers have with their mods." And to the replies that were under this tweet and their everlasting credit, they did such a magnificent job of saying, I don't see how this could feasibly be a parasocial relationship, only because mods are some of the most trusted people that streamers have in their arsenal.
Right.
And that was such a powerful thing that I read, because I'm sitting here going like, I would have said the exact same thing.
Okay.
So this is actually a research topic that has been around since the 1950s. So the first study that was published about this was in 1956. It was about newscasters and people having these emotions and connections with these news anchors, and thought they were giving out good information or they were perceivably attractive. This is the kind of thing where they would say, I like this person, and they're giving off a lot of ethos in terms of their credibility, in terms of their likability. And I feel like there's a connection, and I feel like there is this relationship. But the thing of it is, it's one-sided. So when you talk about parasocial relationships, it is a person watching another person or a character for that matter, and the viewer is having this experience of, I feel like this is real.
Okay.
At the present time, this is something that we'll probably dive into kind of as we go into this conversation. But I don't think that a lot of the people that I watch on television or characters are my friends per se.
Right.
But what I do feel is, I watch a lot of anime, for instance, and
You're in good company.
I cannot help but feel a massive social identity with good old Izuku Midoriya from My Hero Academia. I just feel this connection. He's a go-getter, and I respect that, and I project a lot of my identity. So I love this character, and so the emotions I feel for him if he gets hurt or something, which is all the time, it feels real.
Right.
So this is a theory that actually disappeared almost for a long period of time. Like, there would be the occasional studies, 60s, 70s, and so forth. But then all of a sudden, social media started to become a thing.
Right. And then influencers became a thing.
And so I read a study in 2010, and it was by a person named John Cohen that was writing about the ending of the series of Harry Potter, the books.
Okay.
And said, how are people going to cope with the fact that Harry Potter is no longer in their lives? And I immediately picked up that article, printed it out, and said, go on. I fell in love with this. I fell in love with this. And I kind of went in and out in terms of how much I enjoyed this, but it became what I wanted to be known for when I was pursuing my doctorate in communication. So, and I had such a supportive dissertation chairs, I should say. One of them was Dr. David Westerman, and I said, I want to do a study about Game of Thrones, but I feel like that's kind of dumb, and nobody's going to care about that. And he goes, Emory, what are people talking about every Monday when the show was going on? And I was like, well, I know what I'm talking about every Monday.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, but they're talking about Game of Thrones, right? And he's like, then we have some importance here.
Right.
And of some validity of why this needs to be studied. And I mean, deer in headlights, grand epiphany moment. It was just such a great day to be like doing something that I liked, then transitioning to something I loved. And so I have published several papers on parasocial relationships. I have presented at national and international conferences about it. I try to make it my thing just because I just enjoy it so much. But it is something that I talk about quite frequently, and it is something that I feel like is so ubiquitous, so always around us in terms of the people that we, quote, interact with, that it's something worth talking about.
So it is that understanding of kinship you have with somebody who you might never meet. Is that like kind of the qualification for it to be parasocial?
Yeah, I mean, there's a component of that. So again, the this is where it gets a little tricky. The interaction part is someone watching you,
right?
And that's the interaction. The relationship is just another interaction on top of each other. Like, this is like the only way we've been able to effectively define this, because we use the same scale as interactions as we do relationships. So,
okay.
So naturally, one of the things that we do is we just say a relationship is just more of those interactions.
Okay.
Now, whether or not I'm going to, and this is where, when it comes into social media, Twitch streaming, this is where it gets tricky.
Right.
Because I mean, I was watching the stream a little bit before we got started.
You were studying me. Gotcha.
as we will call, I am lurking. But I didn't want to be like trying to take away any attention of just like, hi, I'm the guest, pay attention to me in chat.
Oh, you can take attention. I get way too much of it. I get like 3 hours of it. I can give like 2 seconds. It's fine. But go ahead.
And this is the kind of thing where you are interacting with the people in your chat. And so we would categorize that as social interaction.
Sure.
But, how do we define relationships? How do we define friendships? And this is where a lot of scholarship is kind of iffy right now. in terms of how that is going. When it comes down to earlier studies, it was easy because we could say, I am never going to talk to Tom Brokaw.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just, it's not going to happen. I'm not going to talk to that news anchor, but now I can go on Twitter
and talk to him,
ping to my favorite celebrity and hope that they might interact back. And if they do, that's considered social interaction.
Right.
So the idea of will I meet this person is not necessarily a component. But at the same time, it's almost where people would say it's not considered parasocial anymore once the actual interaction happens. It's like when you talk back, that's when it came into play. But it's more along the lines, and this is what a lot of parasocial scholars are trying to decipher right now, is there social interaction with parasocial relationships?
Right. Do they still, so are they still parasocial if the person talks to you?
See, and this is where
please
kind of
correct me.
There's no correcting whatsoever. My contention is with this is because I do research with streamers.
Okay.
I have gone to countless PAX conferences, and I have sat in hotel lobbies interviewing streamers about their experiences. To a lot of the people that we've talked to, they say, I have a lot of social interaction with my community, but I don't know who these people are per se. Like I see their screen name and I can make the connection, then that works. But the one thing that really threw me off was somebody told me, they were like, I had a person in my stream that watches on their PlayStation. Mm-hmm. And they don't interact.
Right.
But they came up to me at a convention and she acted like I was her best friend. And she was like, I'm flattered, truly, but I don't know who you are. And I can't make an association with your screen name because, I don't know it.
Right.
So this is where some of that comes into play. And it, again, goes into defining who do we consider our friends in this case.
Right. This is blowing my mind. Okay. So, I don't know if we should hop into the research because I know we were kind of savoring that, but I want to know about the research. So,
however you want to do it. Yeah, that's fine.
I want to know about the research. So is it a pair, like this conversation that I have with these people, they're my community. Like I have feelings for them as a unit, right? Like I appreciate that they're here. It's important to me that we have a conversation. Part of the reason that I literally started this stream is because I didn't want to do a YouTube channel and I didn't want to just do a Twitter and I didn't just want to do a blog. I wanted the live interaction with people. That's why the show started on Twitch instead of YouTube and anywhere else. So I don't know. Like, is my relationship, and some of these people I'll never meet, and then some of these people, like I'm looking in right now in my chat, I can tell you I've met at least 5 of these people, and I've had like pretty great in-depth conversations with them. So, is it not parasocial? Is it parasocial?
There's a couple of schools of thought to bring into this. One is something that when I started this research, I was sorely misinformed about how streaming worked.
Okay.
Which is one of the reasons why I started to stream, because I'm like, I got to figure this out. And one of the things that came up was when I initially wrote my measure, I wrote fans instead of community.
Okay. And that's no bueno.
That's a no bueno. No.
Yeah.
And there were a few, so I had a couple streamers that had, over 500,000 subscribers and so forth. And they were pretty comfortable with that term and they didn't have any problem with it. Other people that I was talking to kind of gave me this, I wouldn't call them fans. So, naturally I want the data to come through however they're saying it. And so I changed the measure. So for future conventions. And this also has another distinction of fandom different from parasocial relationships. So this isn't a fanaticism. This isn't a kind of, I don't want to say worship. Worship's so strong.
Oh yeah, worship is very like that
It's so
implies that I'm
strong.
preaching and I don't want anywhere near that. Yeah.
But
It's a lot.
fanaticism has a lot of social identity that are very similar
Mm-hmm.
to religious beliefs and that kind of thing. So
Mm.
fanaticism is very tough. Now, communities in that case, and feeling like you're a friend with somebody is something completely different. Um, that said, so that was that distinction. But the other thing that needs to be thought about is kind of communication and relationships require a lot of reciprocity.
Right.
So there's a lot of give and take. And the more I've studied this, the more I'm like, y'all, relationships are work.
There are so much work. Even the ones that you're like not supposed to be, they're not supposed to be hard. They're all hard and they all take, yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
effort. Really quick, I have to ask, let's do a mini experiment now. How many of you, what would you guys consider yourselves in chat right now? Would you guys consider yourselves fans? Would you consider yourselves community? Chatters? What would you call yourself right now? And Hammer, thank you so much for that subscription. I appreciate you. A 9 out of 10. What the heck? Community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, community. I haven't met a single yeah, it's work. Community, mod,
Yeah.
friend, bouncer. Moderators are totally
Moderators,
different.
yeah.
Friends. I like friends.
Friends.
Fan.
Mm-hmm.
With most streams, I'm a fan. Mythic
Okay.
Rock. Interesting. Call myself to whom? Each other? To I guess if somebody asked you, if Dr. Daniel was at a convention and asked you, what is your relationship to Mxiety? What would you say?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say, I'm a fan? I'm a spark. Okay, I like that. I'm a sucker for that. So I'm a fan. Or you would say, like, I'm part of her community? Viewer? Myself personally, friend, as a whole community. Okay, yeah, that's I know Bryce, that's different. Like, that's different. That doesn't count. I like know Bryce. I've talked to her like about very personal stuff. I generally, and like she's my friend. I don't really know else. I need to qualify that. I generally stay away from the idea of being a fan. When I join a stream, it's because I want one-on-one interaction with the individual. I'm not even sure what word I would associate with that.
Mm-hmm.
I consider am a friend, but I know there's a gap because there is a little bit of a gap, right? Because when I sign off, I mean, no, because with not a lot of you, but with some of you, I continue talking. But with the whole as the community, I'm done. That's the relationship is closed at that moment. 3
Mm-hmm.
times a week, I sign on for 3 hours at a time, and then afterwards, that's it. I mean, we talk on Discord too, but that's still on my terms because I
Sure.
get to decide. You know, the same way it's on there. A supporter. Oh, a supporter makes sense.
Acquaintance, yeah.
Acquaintance.
Yeah. And see, and that's interesting because I get a lot of, again, streamer friends that I talk to that I'm like, what, someone was like, do you consider them a friend? Do you think you could ask them something? And I'm like, friend might be stretching it. I like this person. I'm friendly with this person. We are a work colleague together and acquaintance. But would I call them a friend? No, they're probably not going to the bar with me after an event at PAX. It's just probably not going to happen.
Okay.
But one thing I'll say about this, I think this is really important to bring out, especially with the question that's brought to the community that I really like, is and something that you wrote on your tweet that I really liked was this idea that parasocial relationships are negative.
Yes.
And this is largely brought to life is because part of the definition of parasocial relationship almost brings it to that light. So it's basically saying that the people that you're viewing in this case, you don't, you wouldn't go at home at the end of the day and say, that person is my friend. So we did a study on, my dissertation was about vapors and so forth. And most people that worked on this were like, I like this person because I think they were talented. So we did cloud chasers and so forth.
Okay.
And so they would say, I like this person. I think they're good at what they do, but do I consider them a friend? No, not at the end of the day.
Okay.
I just listen to what they do. And I think they're very, they thought that they were very talented. We interviewed people who vape. That was one of the criteria
Okay.
of that. But one of the things that I contend, because I wrote another study about a certain death in Game of Thrones,
Uh-huh.
and I say certain death because I once spoiled it in my office, and one of my students didn't know, and she started crying. And I had a duality about myself. One, I felt awful because A, I spoiled it, and B, I know parasocial relationships really well.
Right.
So I understand that hurt. But
Oh
on the other
no.
hand, I gauged it through the Kubler-Ross stages of grief. And I'm like, can you come back in like 1 hour and tell me how you feel?
Can we talk about this in an hour? Fam, are we good if we do any Game of Thrones spoilers? The show's been off air
Yeah,
for a
it's been
while
on for a
though.
while.
Right. Also, I don't know,
I think it's in the title of the paper too.
depends on the death. Depends on the death. Is it the very first big death that you're talking about?
Oh, no. It was. I actually remember the night that it happened. We were about to study. Well, I mean, if we're okay with it, the death of Shireen.
Okay.
Um,
I think everybody's okay with it. They're gonna
yeah,
have
we,
to be
we we
now.
started doing that on Twitter, and I was starting to look up how people were responding to it, and then Jon Snow died. And I looked at my colleague and said, stop the presses, stop everything we're doing, stop all data collection. This is the one we're doing. And I think I made everybody at the North Dakota State Library really mad because I printed out over 3,000 pages of tweets
Oh my
to
god.
content analyze.
That's amazing.
Which was, it was, I mean, by far one of the most fun studies. But what kind of came out of it was, I'm like, these emotions that are being communicated are genuine.
Yeah.
So I actually have a bit of a problem when people are like, your parasocial relationship is not the same as an actual relationship. It goes by the wayside. It's subsided. It's not as important as your actual social
Right,
relationships. And
right,
I'm
right,
like,
right.
actually, I don't think that's true at all. I think some of the most important relationships in our lives are parasocial.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I can't tell you how many people go through politics, for instance,
Right.
and I would sit there and go, have you ever met this political figure?
Right.
And
You
if
feel
you haven't,
very strongly though, one way or another, about them,
and
right?
and it comes to these things like, this is something that person would do. And I'm like, you know that.
Right.
You're sure about that.
Yeah, like I can't even say that about my husband. I'm not even certain. And I've been with him for 11 years, and I
Mm-hmm.
still can't tell you. I think I know what he'll do in a situation, but he's surprised me plenty of times. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And seeing in the chat, yeah, like the president, absolutely, of people saying, I know what I think he would do. And I'm like, you can't say that because you don't have a personal connection with that person. But
Right.
here's the thing, again, it feels real.
Right.
And it's very important to a lot of people. And I guarantee, if you think about it, of people that may not necessarily be directly in your life, of somebody that you talk to all the time, you might have those kind of relationships with someone you don't talk to that much. And my biggest thing is, that's fine. It's perfectly okay, and it's nothing to be ashamed about. And this is the other big thing about it, is that when people talk about this, of saying, I when there have been one or two famous streamers that have passed on, and people
Right.
were really hurt about that.
Right.
I'm like, those feelings are valid.
Right.
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to bring this down.
No, I don't think that's bringing. I mean, we talk about suicide. This is the show to talk about it. But like, yeah, I was thinking about this recently because it was the anniversary of Robin Williams' death, and I was thinking about that. I refer to him still as like, he was my TV dad. Like, I grew up, and that was the dad, because I didn't really have a father figure, so I kind of like watched his interactions on television, like in shows and stuff that he was in, and took those as like a father figure, kind of like, so that is, I don't think that's parasocial. I think that's just not right. But again, like, that's me being negative about a relationship that, like, it's okay. It clearly meant a lot to me. And like, I didn't do anything bad to myself or other people when he passed. and I didn't do anything bad to myself or to other people as I was enjoying his work. Like,
Sure.
so it's not harming anybody. So
No,
yeah.
not necessarily. I mean, there are where parasocial relationships can get out of control, but that's any relationship can get out of control. But it was funny. I did go on a university visit to University of Memphis, and it's always very flattering when people do their homework about you when you arrive.
Right.
And somebody said, "Let's take him to Graceland."
Oh.
And I
Wait,
was like,
so are you an Elvis fan?
I'm not.
Okay.
Not necessarily. Well, I don't. I like his music. I wouldn't say
Okay.
I'm a fan.
Okay, I would call myself a fan. So we're
there
on
you
the
go.
same
Yeah.
page. Okay, but so they took, because that, like, Elvis is the exhibition of parasocial relationship. I mean, like,
One of the biggest ones, right?
Right. Like him and the Beatles like started this, I think, modern day fanaticism as like we know it right now. Right?
Yeah. I think those are definitely two examples that people really identified well. To the fact that with Elvis, there's a week, I can't remember which, where people go to Graceland and just hang out. And that, I think it was the week of his death is when that occurred. And it's like a yearly mourn to the point where it's a social group. They have communion over the fact that, and communion, again, that's like a weirdly religious
It
term.
connects so many things to religion. It's so weird, but like I get it. I get why. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. But yeah, that's kind of the essence of it, though. And I keep thinking, I'm like, Robin Williams, and he made so many good movies about being a dad. Like, What Dreams May Come may be still one of my favorite movies, and I'm like, what an exceptional dad. Holy mackerel.
Yeah.
I'm like, I got a lot to live up to as a husband to do what Robin
but
Williams
like
did.
there were also movies. We can,
Yes,
yeah,
true,
you
true.
can give yourself a smidgy of credit there. But that's why, like, Mrs. Doubtfire, and I know I'm not thinking of stuff, and I remember how I felt it was life-changing watching Good Will Hunting.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Life-changing. Like, I remember watching that and being like, my whole world was turned upside down when he said, "It's not your fault." I sat there, right?
To date.
Right?
Anytime I watch that scene, I am full blown on into tears.
Yeah. You can't not be. Or Dead Poet Society. Yeah, like I said,
also,
like TV dad.
TV dad indeed.
Yeah, Carpe Diem. Exactly. So, but that relationship feels really very real, and I'm able to put distance between myself and that, like, knowing that ultimately it isn't. But is the negative light of it, from your research, and maybe you don't have an answer, but is the negative light of it because people have taken it to such extremes? Like, we literally use the word "to stan" now as a positive thing, where it comes from a song where somebody dies by suicide because they're such a fan of Eminem, and I don't think a lot of people know that that's where that word comes from.
I read the lyrics of Stan when my students first brought that up to me, and I was like, you do realize you're using this as a positive term, and this song is not positive by any stretch of the imagination. And they're like, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm
like, okay, but I still stand for.
But I'm still gonna use that, yeah. There's parts of that, right? There's always going to be the extreme side of it, right?
Right.
However, it's not necessarily in that, science. And when we do social science, we try to not make it to where it's all the extreme.
Sure.
We're trying to get all the cases we can possibly get. And it really was, at the end of the day, you were saying, yeah, I like this person. Yeah, I consider them to be very close, and I get a real emotional, and I want good things to happen to them, but I won't consider them my friend. Here's the thing, though. Those studies were written in the early 2000s and early 2010s. Now we're all jumbled up as parasocial scholars because things like Twitch have come into fruition and they have become very popular. And now we're all running around in circles, which oddly enough, I love, because it's this great avenue of, I don't know the answer, and there might not be a concrete answer, but I am darn willing to find out.
That's how I know you're a researcher. Zeitgeist is probably smiling from ear to ear if she's still here.
Yeah, well, I mean, and we've collaborated on a couple study ideas between her and I, and when it clicks, like the idea comes there, it comes into that frantic running in circles moment where we're just ready to do everything we possibly can.
We have a lot of questions lining up, so I don't know if you want to start answering questions.
Sure.
Or, yeah, okay, because they're covered.
Yeah.
They're covered. All right. You get to experience my socializing relationship, and I do want to get back to the research because wait. Okay, wait. So much to process. So, are they bad? Like, I know you're still working on this research, but like, are they the relationships that Twitch streamers have with their community? Are they parasocial or are they social, and are they bad?
I don't know if I would necessarily put a label on it one way or another.
Okay.
And I know that seems like a cop-out answer, but I know a lot of streamers that do consider a lot of their communities their friends. And they outright told me that the people that come into our stream are my friends, whereas others would disagree. And so there's a term that we look at, especially into qualitative information, called saturation. And once we achieve that saturation of the amount of people saying this more and more, is more of a theme. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that, because we're people and it's social science. This is an incredibly difficult thing to do, is try to analyze people, because we're all going to have different ideologies. Like I would notice bigger streamers with more followers say, I keep things closer to the chest. I have a very close-knit group of friends. It's not that I push anybody away. I'm friendly to my community. I know who I'm talking to. However, I don't consider them my friends, and therefore I would perceive it as parasocial. Whereas another segment is that we saw smaller streamers and say, I've got 15 people in my stream. I know all of them, and I would consider them all my friends. And that doesn't necessarily mean that smaller streams means you are friends, and bigger streams means that you are not. Because we also interviewed smaller streamers that say, I would not give out any personal information whatsoever. And it's one of the reasons why when I do PAX panels, I try to be extremely respectful of, do you want to go by your Twitter handle?
Right.
So,
oh my God.
Now there's not a real answer to it, but we are kind of going into this what if mode of it, because we got some very interesting information of how people were communicating with the streamer, and one of the things that came up was, and I do want to address questions, but one of the things that came up was, I'm not your therapist.
Right. Oh, can of worms open
over and over again. Was, and I couldn't help but sit there. It's qualitative information. I'm going, okay, I can't put this in my back pocket anymore. This is full-fledged on the table. We got to talk about this. What do you mean by that? And what was communicated to me by quite a few individuals where they were saying that the interaction is so strong and the bond with the viewer to the streamer is so strong that the community was saying, I don't feel comfortable with the person that I am working with as a therapist. So I am communicating some of the anxieties, maybe depression that I'm dealing with, to a person that I feel safe with. And the thing of it was, and I really admired how the streamers that I talked to communicated with me. They said, I want to endorse everything about that, and say, hey, look, this is a problem and it needs to be addressed, but I can't do it because I'm not a licensed therapist.
Right.
And this is the thing that, it goes on in the back of my mind as being a very small streamer is, yes, I have a doctorate, but it is not in psychology.
Right.
Despite what everybody thinks. it is one of those things where I want to pay attention to those areas of what can I say? What can I say? How can I approach this in such a situation that is endorsing, but also makes it so I don't say anything that's going to screw something up? Because that was probably one of the biggest messages I ever got in grad school. And it was about research, but I mean, obviously it works in therapy too. And they were like, if you do this wrong, you can screw up somebody's life.
Right.
And this was my first year as a PhD student of, if you screw up your research, you could ruin somebody's life. And I'm sitting there going, okay.
I'll just not research ever again because that's safe.
Can I just stick to teaching, please? And they're like, well, that can happen too if you're doing it. I'm like, I think I need to quit.
I think I quit now, right? If I quit now, I'm good. I'm ahead of this. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but this was a very interesting finding, and it kind of gotten to a point where I wanted to start talking to people about safety protocols for streamers, especially newer streamers, because this was the other thing that came up was most everybody I talked to when it came to these interviews, they almost always said, when I started, I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah. Well, like anything, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Anything you start, I have no idea. You driving, anything.
But, but in some cases, like if I want to pick up running, I can do it and fail and nobody see me.
Sure.
Whereas in streaming, people could see me.
Yeah.
Now, granted, people could see me run, but at the same time, it's
not a public stage.
It's not supposed to be. Yeah, right. Like when I do go run, I honestly don't want to talk to people. The thing in COVID has I don't want to be around people when I run. So I not much has changed in that department of me going out for a run. But again, when the idea is to potentially play something or potentially talk to somebody, you are setting yourself up to be in that public domain, if you will. And again, a lot of people just would sit there and go, I don't know what that meant when I started.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I a lot of people, especially right now because of the pandemic, first of all, people trying to stream skyrocketed from 4 million to 7.5.
Yeah.
So that's everybody just being like, well, I feel really lonely right now. Why don't I, I'm not saying that's the case for everybody, right?
No.
Very much generalizing, but how many of those people are, I'm feeling lonely right now. Let me reach out to the world and see if somebody answers, right?
Right.
So I can see that being a very probably great way to perceive that you are going to get a social need met without realizing that you are also kind of required in this contract to give a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, no, I just, we got this data and we're starting to transcribe it now and hopefully get it into publication for too long. But I just thought this was super interesting, and I wanted to be able to, again, communicate it in such a way that when we get the results, when we present the results, we can talk to young streamers that want to get started into doing this and say, this is something that might occur.
You should be prepared for it.
Yeah.
I think this should be part of, because Twitch has like its own now broadcasting system and stuff. I think this should be part of the startup net. Like, here's what you should be prepared for. Here's people are going to come into your streams and do this, and here's how you can defend yourself. Take a mental health first aid course. Like, I push those hard because of that. But before I move on, because I'm gonna forget. Before we move on, it has since dropped back down to 5.5 mil. But just to give you an idea, that was how many people tried streaming the first month between March and May. That's how many people tried streaming when
guilty.
When COVID. There you go. No, but there's nothing wrong with that. But
no,
like, just a lot of people had the same idea you had.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. All right, are we ready for questions?
Let's do it.
Okay, Moopalu asks, if I send a snail mail letter to a news anchor or I call into the show, is it now a social relationship even if I can no longer interact with them afterwards?
So the research would say that no, that would be considered parasocial. I mean, again, this is where the beginning of that particular research came out, was with meteorologists, news anchors, people on QVC,
Right. Oh
and
gosh.
that to me was one of the most interesting things, because you could call in and talk to them.
Right.
But no, the literature would still get into saying that would be considered parasocial.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So,
Okay. All right. Next question. Yes.
sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
did you? Oh, wait. Were you finishing? Did I interrupt
No,
you?
no, 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 no.
Okay.
I mean, it's all I was going to say is, again, it doesn't make it that it's any less valid. It's just, it would be considered parasocial.
Okay. Right. Is it a social relationship after only just one meeting, or does it require some sort of established mutual relationship beyond a
Great
hello?
question. Yeah, great question. The idea behind it is this: the way we interpret the bridge from parasocial to, as some scholars would say, weak social, which we haven't developed any kind of metric or scale to define this. But they would say you can actually develop that relationship after one interaction.
Oh, okay.
So, and this is one of the reasons, we have trouble with this scale sometimes, is because we were like, can't a communication bond be so strong on the first interaction that they would say, I mean, it's not quite like maybe it is quite like stepbrothers of, did we just become best friends
Yep.
after the first interaction?
Right.
Does that happen to an extent? Yes. Right. Like I can talk about some of the people I met in PAX, and now granted, I was seeing them at a very positive light. They were, we're at PAX, we're having a ball.
Everybody's kind of their best, and really, really, there's a lot of energy.
That's a lot of energy
at
PAX. I mean, this is a reason why PAX Crash or PAX Pox exists, because all I want to do is lay down for 3 days and not get up after PAX, because I've expelled so much energy.
So much energy, and like every reserve and bank that you had is completely empty. But like in like the best way possible.
Absolutely. But again, it would sit there and go, would I go, like some of these people that I met, I would say they live 2.5 hours 2.5 hours away. Would I visit them afterward? Yes, absolutely. And did I connect with them on Twitter and Facebook and all the other social medias? Yes, absolutely, because I wanted to remain that contact. But it's because I felt that bond so strongly after that first interaction. So there is support to make that argument of, even with one interaction, you can establish that relationship.
Okay. All right. Surreal is asking the tough questions.
All right.
I believe that this one is, I don't know, I think this one's hard. Surreal asks, is the relationship with God people have...
Oh, yeah.
When they're religious parasocial?
This is a great question, and it has actually been something that my colleagues have been telling me to research for a number of years. And I live in North Carolina, and
right. Okay, that tells me everything.
It can be a little bit difficult to try to mention that a person that you're following a religious script based on text, that this would be considered parasocial.
Right.
And I would make an argument in this case that it might be, but I'd also want to do the research on it and try to be as absolutely respectful of a person's religious beliefs, because it is their foundation for life.
Right.
And also, this might be something where I would say that they might have an experience that they would say, no, actually, I did have an interaction.
Oh, true.
So that wouldn't be out of the question in that research. But the problem is, I have a very I am very tentative in terms of how I want to walk that tightrope in terms of asking that question. You have to be
respectful. And,
exactly.
Yeah.
And I want to be respectful, because, when parasocial comes up, people automatically think it's bad. And if I'm automatically bringing in a negative stigma towards something with religion,
right.
yeah, then it's immediately going to get shut down and it's going to be a very bad conversation. And I don't want that. And I don't want that for that person. So, but on the flip side of things, I did write a book chapter in the psychology of Final Fantasy where I looked at the cult of Yevon in Final Fantasy X and said how the people of Spira were having a parasocial relationship. Hey, there it is.
There it is.
with you, Yevon.
We stand this book.
Hey, all right.
We've been promoting the book for quite a bit. Yeah.
Super awesome people that are on it. Brilliant. And I was there too. So happy to be a part of it. And this was not meant to be a pitch, but it is something that I just enjoyed the hell out of this book because I've been labeled a lot by my colleagues as a doctor of death because I talk a lot about it. I research a lot about it. And this one I did genocidal cults and Leon Fessinger's work in cognitive dissonance when his experiment was, I'm going to go visit a cult. So, there you go. So that's kind of where I get into that stance of it's a real tightrope line to walk when it comes to the subject of religion. And it's something that maybe when I'm tenured at my university and I have some decent job security and we're not in the middle of a pandemic, I would really like to approach that topic. That's a great question.
Neat. Okay. All right. Landar asks, and this is a little bit long, so I hope I can do it justice.
Okay.
Landar asks, do things have to be so complicated, really? I was just thinking about other social situations where, like, okay, I know these people in some fashion. This is my friend. These are people I like, but I'm not close to, etc. Isn't streaming just another form of that kind of thing? Unless somebody's like ninja level size, of course.
Yeah. So this is, I love this question because I ask myself that every day of when my dissertation chairs play devil advocate with me when I propose a research idea. They're like, yeah, but you might want to consider. I'm like, don't do that to me. That's not fair.
I don't want to hear the outskirts.
No, I want to hear that I'm right.
Yes.
I want to hear that I have a good idea all the time. Yes.
All the time.
Now I'm glad that they tell me I'm wrong or that it needs to be revised because, then I might get to 100 people that were like, yeah, that was not a good idea. But to the question of like, do things have to be so complicated? I brought up a point at a National Communication Association. This was back in 2015. I'm like, is a high school crush a parasocial relationship? And no joke, somebody in the audience was like, give me a freaking break. He was smiling when he said it. It was very tongue in cheek, but there was some like, it like fired in his brain just a little bit like it could be, and I don't like you for it. Why did you have to say that? And I'm like, I don't know what just happened. I didn't mean to make enemies. And I honestly was just curious because I'm like, if I don't talk to this person, but I have a mental projection of who I think this person is, even though I don't actually talk to them, doesn't that kind of make it parasocial? And they were like, you might have a point. I don't know, but that's just such a mean question to ask. So yes, everything has to be complicated, especially within social science, because again, we are all in some way different people. So again, that makes science really complicated in this field.
It does. And we talked about this a lot, that like really what we're trying to get at when we do research is like the average, the mean, not very, unless you're specifically looking for the outside stuff, but
Sure.
Usually you're trying to figure out what the average is so that you can extrapolate based on that to multiple other people. So if you're outside of this thing that somebody found research on, it doesn't mean that something's wrong with you. It just means there's a huge spectrum of before and after the average, before and after the mean, and yeah.
And that's a hard thing to cross, especially when it comes to reporting this to students.
Yeah.
As a college professor, I'll come in and report some finding, and they're like, I don't do that. And I'm like, well, you're not always going to be meant to do that, because it's not within, again, saturation where, I mean, it's happening enough, but it might not necessarily be you.
Mm.
So, again, that's what makes it complicated. And yes, to that question, social science is complicated. That's what makes it frustrating, but it also makes it really fun,
Yeah.
and always get to explore it. Like I never have a dull moment, for both good and bad.
There you go. Heck, listen, it gave you a job. How could you complain?
Yeah, exactly.
Is parasocial linked to roles versus the people themselves? Asked Bliffle Split.
Oh, good question. And I would guess I would say, the roles as in like how you defined yourself with a role, like a social identity or like a job. Um, that would be one thing. So, because there is specific areas of theory that talk about what are called subjective norms. And this is basically social groups that we belong to and what role we play within those groups. And so those are the kind of things that I would probably make a case for. Yeah, it can absolutely be part of a social role in that case. Your identity or your job or, something that you participate in might have some influence, with it, but at the same time, again, it's kind of wishy-washy, in terms of it would probably be depicted on the strength of the role.
Okay.
Because a lot of people are trying to look at identity and identification with parasocial interactions. And what we've more or less started to get into is how much strength of identification towards something, towards a role, will play. And what I would argue, at least, is if you have a strong connection with something, a very strong strength within that role, then it's probably less likely to be parasocial, because you invest so much time into it. But that also is the reciprocity for the other person. Do they feel the same way?
Huh. So that does sound like a big component. Does the other where is the other person in the relationship, right?
Sure. And that is the foundation of why parasocial gets into the mix in the first place, is that the other person doesn't necessarily feel the same way you do. Gotcha. Or doesn't know.
Right. That's right. All right. So Moopaloo asks, what are there any tests for parasocial versus social relationships? So I believe they mean like, is there like a litmus test that you could be like, is this parasocial or social? I think.
No, there are scales, that people use, that you can, like for survey research, there are multiple scales that people utilize for parasocial interaction, that they would say, here is this person, how do you feel about them? Do you like when they come on screen? Do you want them to succeed? Do you feel bad when they fail? Again, it's very emotionally driven, in this case, but as far as a psychological test, not that I'm aware of, that there isn't really one. It's specifically for research right now, and part of it is because it's just hard to pin down right now.
Yeah,
and it might always be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that it's just hard. If it's hard to define, then it's hard to make a test for it. Yeah.
These may not be satisfying answers, and I apologize. Fine. And I apologize, but I will say, this is my career, and I'm a lot of times not satisfied with my own answers.
But like that's how you know you're a good researcher, right? Because you're gonna keep digging.
I like your outlook on that. That is very kind of you.
Mama Blue asks, where is the line of a healthy parasocial relationship versus a toxic one?
Yeah, I mean, my contention for that always would be, do you mean to intend harm to yourself or to anybody else, with it, whether it be physically, emotionally, that kind of thing? And if it's, and are you willing to listen to the other person if they feel like those expectations are violated? Would the other person, if they came up to another and said, look, I appreciate you as a person, I'm happy to have you as either a community member or someone to talk to, but I have to draw the line in this case. Now, people do that a lot more respectfully than how I just said it. But would it be that the person would say, okay, that is a fair point. I need to take a step back, reevaluate the relationship versus, if somebody came back and said, you are my family, then that's a different story.
Right.
Right. And so I think parasocial comes so much with the reciprocity of how does the other person feel, and when it becomes dangerous is when those expectations are violated on the other side of things. And obviously there's a severity of it. But again, if it's causing harm in some capacity, it needs to be reevaluated.
Okay, fair.
Would be my 2 cents for it.
I think that's more than 2 cents. That's at least 5. Moopaloo asked a follow-up, so I'll let you touch upon it. I mean, Moop, isn't okay. So the question is, it's hard. If it's hard to define, how do we know it exists? And it exists because there's an entire job revolving around it. So clearly, it exists.
No, but it is a good question, and there are scholars that don't think parasocial relationships are a thing.
Oh, okay.
I have been to conferences, and it's the main reason they think that is because with certain communication theories, their scales can be considered weak by some other people. So they would say, I don't really think that this is a good thing to be researching. And I kind of just look back at them and I'm like, well, I think that they are. I've got a lot of data to suggest that they are. So, and I think they are, while they are very confusing, I think there's a lot of truth that is involved with it. So it's considered worth researching in my mind.
Right.
So whether or not they like that answer is another story, but that was my argument. Gatekeeping. I see somebody in the comments saying, yeah, it's everywhere for sure.
All right, so we have a long one from Zeitgeist. Do parasocial relationships impact us socially and emotionally in the same way as non-parasocial relationships? Trying to get for you to talk about the Game of Thrones study. If I already missed it because I was putting my baby down to bed, I'm gonna be bummed out. Haha.
Game of Thrones study is the best study I think I have done or ever will do. I'll give a little background of it. I already told you my printing process of pissing off the North Dakota State Library. But the reason we wanted to do it was I was like, boy, I noticed that people got upset when Harry Potter ended, the books and the movies and so forth. What about if a character died? We've seen it in they've been briefly caught up in MASH or Dallas was the 2 big ones that they would talk about. And I said, people in Game of Thrones are dropping left and right through these seasons.
Yeah.
I'm like, what a study to look at. And again, having a great dissertation chair, this person was like, yeah, you're right. Let's study it. I'm like, oh, okay. Super. So when I was looking at it, one of the things that came up was the question was asked, how do you evaluate death? How do you evaluate a person's feelings towards death? And I was like, I can really only think of one answer, and that's the Kubler-Ross's stages of grief.
Right.
And he's like, well, can we code for that? I'm like, yeah. I mean, if somebody's expressing how much they hate George R.R. Martin or D.B. Weiss or Zach Benioff for killing their favorite character, I'd consider that an anger response towards that person.
Right.
And so we went through several thousand tweets of how people felt after this happened and how it progressed. And we were like, is it matching with the Kubler-Ross model stages of grief? Which now Kubler-Ross would state that they don't necessarily have to go in order, but the idea is, oh gosh, denial, anger, depression, bargaining, acceptance. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
good.
Sounds right. That sounds right to me.
I think that's right. Yeah. It's been a while since I worked on that theory. But we were like, does it follow that same pattern? And what we found was super interesting was yes, largely, except for one, depression hit almost immediately and stayed at the top of the frequency over the span. So we did it every 100 tweets. and we were like, let's make a mark, let's make a mark, let's make a mark. And depression was almost at the top every single one. But then all of a sudden, denial shot through the roof because people are like, he ain't dead.
Right. That was me.
Dead.
That was me. That was me. I was like, they didn't kill him. They couldn't have. He's too handsome to die. No, I didn't even have a good reason. I was just like, no, he's too good looking.
That was the main reason for depression too, is he was too handsome. I can't lose this person in my life. It's the very Jason Momoa effect when we lost Khal Drogo.
Yes, that was
gorgeous man, and that's tough. My wife is still probably not too thrilled about that one. But what we found were those emotions are valid. I think some of the best ones were not only the angry ones of just saying, again, this is not good for how people are communicating, but as a researcher, I found it fascinating how angry people were at D.B. Weiss and Zach Benioff. But also people expressed, I'm going to take a day off work because there's a death in the family. I saw that tweet probably more than 60, 70 times in that sample.
Oh no.
So yeah. I mean, and Guy says, I'm still angry. Yeah. I mean, but that was the kind of consideration for it, was why we made the, I wouldn't say claim's a little strong. We made the argument that, y'all, these emotions are real with parasocial relationships, and they're not something that is completely set aside versus social relationships. And although I don't consider Jon Snow my friend, I consider the interactions that I've had with him to be very impactful, maybe to a point where they're more impactful than some of the relationships I've had in social relationships.
Yeah, there you go. I don't disagree. I don't disagree. There are definitely, I definitely have stronger relationships with some fictional characters than I have with people that I've met in real life that I've attempted to make close relationships with. That's just like I didn't, bond with for some reason.
And I think that goes back to the point that was made of the question of, is it a thing? And I would say yes, because I think there are parasocial relationships that are more important than social relationships.
All right. Okay, Just Angela asks, it's another really good one. Okay, Just Angela asks, how do you advise a streamer to react to a parasocial relationship when a viewer thinks that you're their best friend and you have to explain to them how they think they know you, but you know nothing about them? I've personally had issues with this in the past.
I really wish I could give an answer, and I think Mxiety would be a better person to answer something to that effect, because we've gotten data for it. But at the same time, personally, I haven't experienced, so I can't say anecdotally in that case what we found. We've seen several different patterns of it in terms of being kind yet being somewhat dismissive. And what I mean by that is somebody would say, it's great seeing you at a PAX, but my close group here has got a lot of things that we're going to do. Enjoy your PAX. So I would say kind, polite, and it's a very short thing. But that's actually one of the things that I would like to find out in my research of what are those strategies? What are the best practices? And again, Em, you might know that a lot better than I do.
If we really want an answer for that, I think we can take, if Mr. Doc doesn't mind, I would love to take a moment to. I would love to take a moment to answer that. And I think the answer is very similar to the one you gave. I don't think you're super far off. I mean, just, first of all, treat them like a person. But I also think you kind of have to treat it like a breakup, right? So imagine you met somebody and you're not vibing with them, and you're not going to want to continue seeing them. And so you have to break up with them in the politest way possible, right? We're not going to send them a text message. We're not going to send them a tweet and be like, by the way, I don't like you. In the nicest way possible, explaining that like you said, you have other commitments. That's a really good one. I've also had moderators speak to somebody on my behalf,
Mm-hmm.
because it's one thing for me to say, hey, this really makes me uncomfortable. Although that's not a statement somebody can necessarily argue with, because you can't tell me if I'm comfortable or uncomfortable.
True.
People will argue with that. But if somebody else comes to that person and says, I've observed this behavior, and as somebody else, basically in society, I am somebody else who is having a similar interaction with you, and I'm here to notify you that you are not your interaction is not as healthy as one should be. So
Mm-hmm.
basically having somebody that's enough of an outsider to also say, like, hey, I get where you're coming from, but it's still not good what you're doing. And I
Mm-hmm.
found that helps that person a lot more. I mean, I've had people literally afterwards leave my stream. Like, there are people who I've never seen again. There are people
Mm-hmm.
who there was one person I know that they had that conversation. Somebody had that conversation with them because I just didn't know how to approach it anymore. They kept asking me to meet in person.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody else came and approached them, and that person like disappeared completely. And that was that. And unfortunately, that's how it's going to be. You have to also, I think, come to terms with the fact that like you're going to lose people, because the truth is, if they're looking for that relationship from you and they can't get it from you, your denial is their opening to go and look for that for someone else, right?
Sure.
So that's something to understand. If that's what they're looking for and you can't offer that, there's nothing wrong with that. But
Mm-hmm.
also know that they might go seeking that from someone else, and that means that they might no longer be part of your community. You might not hear from them, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah, and I those are obviously extremely good points. And I do think it's, again, very, I do like the first and foremost ideology of, one, they are a person.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, breakups are hard any way you look at it. So
Yeah.
I couldn't see this as being any less difficult in that. So thank you.
Yeah. I think it's also fair, just last bit, because I know we're asking you questions, but I think it's also fair to state your boundaries very firmly. And I think that's a huge, huge portion of it, to say, if somebody's making you uncomfortable, you say, I'm uncomfortable. You are making me uncomfortable. This situation makes me uncomfortable. Stating that and stating your boundaries and stating what your preference would be for the relationship is a lot better for somebody who might not be able to read social cues as well, right? So, again, breaking up with somebody by saying, like, yeah, it's not you, it's me, is a lot crappier than saying, yeah, you really like Elvis and I really don't like Elvis and you're like super obsessed with, so I just don't think that we're gonna work out. It's just nicer, I think, to set your boundaries and be firm, to set here's a reason why this is not going to work,
Mm-hmm.
versus just saying, yeah, no.
And that is a consistent thing that we found, was people were saying being upfront and establishing rules right off the bat is probably one of the more essential things of being a streamer in general. I can't tell you how many people were like, no, they know right off the bat, this is my
Right.
area, this is my space.
Right.
Please make sure that you respect that.
Right.
And, and obviously streamers are going to have loose or tight variations of what those rules are. But no, I think that's an excellent point.
Surreal asks, if people notice that they are too deep into that parasocial relationship and want to get out or want to distance themselves, does it affect them the same way and as much as distancing yourself in a regular social relationship?
I would say in a lot of cases, probably, because again, if the severity of those emotions are similar in that capacity, I would feel that they would be. But at the same time, this is something where I would want to collaborate with someone who is a probably to either do therapy or be a psychologist to further help determine that. Because I feel like I could give a safe answer with that, but at the same time, I don't know that for sure.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. I love, I was just talking about this on Twitter. I love that I don't know. I love I don't know way more than here's some stuff I pulled out of my butt instead.
I don't like BSing people, and I try to tell my students, especially when it comes to classes, that I'm still learning it myself. Please let me get back to you and figure it out. And if I can't, we can figure it out together as best as possible. So, or find the person that can.
All right, Stride Cipher asks, by the way, everybody, sorry I closed the queue. I just want to be respectful of Dr. Daniel's time, and we can always have him back. There's plenty more to talk about, but yes. Let's 2 more questions, and then you are free for the evening. Stride Cipher asks, do you believe that parasocial interactions have never existed before the advent of current mass media? Do you think that it's ever been... it has ever been or was greater than now it has been in history. I'm reading this wrong. I don't know why I'm having a very hard time, but do you understand or do you want me to reread?
I think so. The distinction I would try to make is with current is where I would be a little bit conflicted with the answer, because again, when it comes to did it exist before media, I would argue probably. But it was never researched until mass media kind of came into play, because that's where it started. Again, this is a mid-50s research project looking at newscasters. Has it changed since then? Yes, absolutely. Because of the way that we can interact with each other in one fashion or another when it comes to the responses. So, again, I would not talk to a news anchor in the 1950s. I probably could now, or at least have a lot easier time doing it.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. Do you believe, Stride Cipher asks, do you believe that parasocial interactions have ever existed before the... Wait, I'm rereading the same question. Good job, me. Mama Blue asks, would you say parasocial relationships are necessary to help us understand our emotions towards relationships? Similar to how fables teach us life lessons. Oh, that's a great question.
That is a great question. That's one where I would say I would like to research that.
That's really interesting.
I would really like to research that. As I don't necessarily see it necessarily as practice, and I don't know that you're trying to imply practice, but I think there is something to be said for being able to self-reflect on some of the relationships. I do that all the time, actually. When I was writing my dedication for my dissertation, I talked about the importance of my relationship with my wife and talked about exit strategies when it came to parasocial. And I said parasocial relationships are typically very easy to exit out of. If I don't like something, I can leave. But I said, in a lot of ways, social relationships were very complex in that capacity, because even if I were to have an argument with a loved one of mine, I would want to do a lot of things to understand what made that argument happen. And to where I would say in this, and where I've finished my dedication, my relationship with my wife is the most important relationship I have.
Right.
And so that's it's almost like a self-discovery through going through it all, and just how much that kind of journey and exploring. My mom always says, yeah, my son is a PhD in studying people who aren't real.
That's nice. Only moms can word it like that. That's
yeah,
so nice.
I was like, I think that's a good mom joke.
Yeah.
For doing that.
It's a mom burn. Really.
It's a good mom burn, and I actually really, really like it. But it was one of those kind of things where I said these are important, but I also know which ones are the most important to me.
Cool.
So. But I want to research that. I'm actually going to write that down. I like that.
Do it. Here, let me copy paste it for you.
Yes, please.
Wait, can I? I can no longer copy paste it. Thank you, Streamlabs chatbot.
Oh.
Oh my gosh. I think. Hold on. Oh, we could. I just scrolled up. Here it is. I'm gonna throw it into our Twitter discussion. There you go. Okay, there it is. All right. Well, Do you have any closing comments? Anything else that you want to make sure that people know before you head out?
Just understanding of, again, the work that comes into relationships one way or another, and the expectations for the reciprocity of the other person. Always listen, always consider how other people are thinking, but also think of how you feel about it as well. These are all important things within relationships. There are all these what are called dialectics that we kind of separate ourselves and bring ourselves together in some way, and finding a lot of balance for you and the person that you are connecting with is extremely important. And those are, I think, just at least basic tenets in communication that should really be considered when you are pursuing friendship, romance, that kind of thing. So, yeah, and and just that science is complicated, but it's also a lot of fun. So we don't make a lot of sweeping judgments about things. Science fails a lot, and it's also extremely slow, which is why a lot of people don't like it, and they love pop science.
Sure.
So I always say kind of respect the process of how science works, because it's a ton of work and it's constant failure of, again, calling a community fandom right off the bat. I'm like, I already struck out before I even got started in my study, and having to revise it was somewhat humiliating, but awesome at the same time, because I learned something.
Yeah, you immediately got to be like, "Oh, I learned a thing. I'm gonna fix it before yeah."
Before the next person, I've got to fix that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Well,
So,
Dr. Daniel, everybody, please go check out Dr. Daniel. Start with his Twitter. It links out to other stuff that he does, so I think that's a great place to start. Definitely give him a follow there, please. I'm gonna spam that a little bit. From my community to you, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and answer all of our questions. This was absolutely the coolest thing that I don't think I would have thought to talk about it by myself. Like I don't think that I would have sought this conversation out, and I'm really glad that it came to be. Like, it's awesome. I don't know if I explained that properly.
No. You did it perfectly. And first and foremost, I'm humbled to be considered and being able to talk about this. I know some of the people that have come on to your program to talk, and I just have such respect and admiration for so many people that you've had. Aww. So being a part of this means so much, and I'm really honored. And great questions. And please feel free. I am not the person that likes to stand on any kind of ivory tower, because my little ivory tower that's like a foot tall is full of failure. And it's like slowly building up. But at the same time, I'm like, everything that I've done in terms of my accomplishment has been met with a lot of criticism and regret and hardships. And I am always willing to answer questions, talk about research. This is such a very important thing to me, is this line of research, is streaming research. So if you have any questions, observations, or just want to talk parasocial relationships, I'm all about it. This is probably a thing I talk about way more than I should.
Nonsense. If somebody being passionate about something is always amazing. I love seeing that. It's contagious. So it's all good.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody. We will be right back. And don't forget to be the light, but mostly stretch. We're going to stretch for now.